see if I can get this so that my back isn't towards every single person in the room. Give me a moment.
Okay, I'm the tall guy now sitting in front of everybody.
You're fine.
But you're used to that.
Yes.
The truth is, I can't have myself videoed just in my mole spot the whole time.
It's already rolling. Or over if you want to.
Give him your hat,
No,
sir.
it's,
Clark, give him your hat.
unfortunately, it's been already documented. I'm just gonna stand, I guess, so I can see the group.
Sure.
No, I may be different again. I'm ready when you are.
Okay, I guess, well, special meeting of the Board of Water Commissioners called to order in regards to discussions about Cooper Lake Dam improvements. I'll turn the meeting over to Greg, our consultant.
Hi, thanks for everybody coming. And I'm here to chat about really nothing new in this presentation. It's really an update to try to come to a decision point on how to move forward at the dam. So what I'm going to be talking about today are the drivers as to why we need to do this project. Then there are a few options, one calling the baseline project. There are two potential projects to raise the dam. And then we have a formal recommendation. And then a little bit of discussion about how to move forward. So I said there's nothing new. What you're going to see here are slides that have already been presented in some way or another to the board and in other public meetings through August. My first presentation, I guess, was August 2012. My latest was January of 2016. And really, each time there was just a progression of work. We learned more, we refined the recommendation, until finally, in the April timeframe, we were pretty much where we are today, just stewing over what to do. So why are we here? Back in 2007, there was an observation at the toe of the dam where there was a manhole. A valve was going to be replaced, the manhole was pulled, and the top of the manhole was slightly shifted, which caused some concern because the manhole was at the toe of the dam. So there was some initial evaluations and site visits and calculations done, and it was determined that the dam was stable, but it didn't meet the factors of safety that are recommended by New York State and the Army Corps of Engineers. 2 years later, the state of New York passed new dam safety laws, specifically targeting owners of dams that are high hazard or significant hazard. This is a high hazard dam. What a high hazard dam is one that it's imagined if the dam were to fail, regardless of the dam's condition, it could be brand new or it could be very old and decrepit. If the dam fails, does anyone die? Is anyone likely to die? So the answer here is yes, people are likely to die. There's communities downstream. It's a high hazard dam. As an owner of a high hazard dam, the new law requires you to perform an engineering assessment of the dam, which essentially has you look at three different things. Is the spillway of the dam sufficiently large enough to pass the probable maximum flood? An enormous storm, Noah's Ark type storm. In years past, no one could comprehend what that meant when I stood in these presentations. Now people understand. Irma. When Irma arrives in Kingston, our spillway has to be capable of passing it so the dam doesn't overtop and fail. So that might not be an exact comparison, but you get the idea. The other thing that has to happen is you have to have stability, factors of safety for stability on the dam, meaning that the dam isn't to slide or overturn and isn't going to fail in the event of an earthquake. And the last thing you need to evaluate is whether you have an outlet that is capable of draining the dam should there be a pending emergency. If there's something happening and your options are drain the dam or let the dam fail, you're going to drain the water out to the extent possible. In this case, you have insufficient spillway capacity, you have insufficient factors of safety, and you have no operable low-level outlet. So there needs to be work done, there needs to be improvements And one of the things that we looked at early on is whether we could utilize the existing intake tower that's there. The intake tower is where the water is taken out of the reservoir and delivered to the water system. So it was an original structure that had been built on top of, as the dam has been raised in the past, so it was reutilized, built on top of. We did some investigations and we determined that it's not usable. So you're gonna have to put in a new intake tower, new inlet piping in order to maintain the functionality of the reservoir. And the other thing that we discussed along the way is, because we have to do all this work, is this not a good time to prepare for the future and maybe build more storage into the reservoir? Those are the project drivers. I'm going to talk about three different.
Before you proceed, I think you should make the point to the board, when you talked about a pending disaster causing dam failure such as a storm, I think the board should be made aware, and I think they already are, that the intake to that reservoir is not by means of a stream or a river, which during an emergency usually overflows, which causes a reservoir to overflow, whereas this reservoir is filled by means of a pipe from a stream some distance away, and in the event of an emergency, that pipe could always be closed so that additional water or storm water would not come in other than what would normally come out of the sky in rainwater. Am I correct, Greg?
Couldn't have said it better. That is exactly right. This is unique in that the river doesn't flow into the reservoir like a traditional,
Such as California.
such as Oroville, right, where there's an uncontrolled inflow during a storm. Here you can shut the inflow off. That being said, there is a small watershed, and there does need to be, and there's a significant amount of water that would fall on top of the reservoir. So while you could shut it off, it still doesn't have the spillway capacity that it's supposed to have. It is not nearly as dramatic. The volume of water that would overtop wouldn't be sustained for hours and hours and hours or days and days. It would be a quick event, but possibly consequential. So it still needs to be addressed. So I'm going to talk about three different projects. The baseline project accomplishes a few things. It achieves regulatory compliance. It will give you the spillway capacity you need. It will establish the factors of safety the state requires and the Army Corps of Engineers requires. And it will restore all the operational flexibility that the structure had when it was constructed. It will put you back to where you were, ahead of where you were, but initially, from an operational standpoint, as it was constructed, it'll be more stable. It'll be more easily maintained in terms of the slope. What we're going to do that, the spillway capacity is going to be achieved through storage. So because we don't have this gigantic inflow, as Bill mentioned, we can take advantage of a little bit of storage, because really all you're doing is capturing the rain. A lot of rain, but you're capturing on top of the reservoir. By raising the dam just a little bit, we can temporarily store the water and then release it while the storm passes. So that's how we're going to be addressing spillway capacity. We're going to be, in addition to raising the dam to 1109, that's 1109 is what the elevation that we're proposing. 1108 is its current elevation. We're going to flatten the slope. It's about a 2-on-1, 2.5-on-1 now. We're going to make it 3-on-1. 3-on-1 is what's recommended. 3-on-1 is something you could drive a mower on and mow the grass. What's there now is too steep, almost to walk on. It's very difficult to inspect. It's hard to see what's going on. It's covered with rock. The rock is steep. It's a challenge to maintain. And finally, there'll be a new intake tower so that you'll have more operational flexibility to operate your water system. So the new intake tower you'll see on the plan in a minute, it is located south of where the existing one is. There'll be 3 new inlet pipes that will be dropped into the reservoir, and you'll be able to remove water from the reservoir at different elevations. That gives you the ability to choose the water that has the best water quality for the time of the year. It's a closed chamber, meaning when you are there, you look down and it'll be empty. There'll be pipes in there, but it won't be full of water. The existing chamber is full of water. If you want to work in that chamber, you got to work underwater. So it'll be a closed system. All the existing piping that's there now will be grouted. One of the biggest challenges in dealing with old dams is they got a lot of pipes through them. And each one of them represents a risk for water to move through, around. So when possible, we try to grout these things and find an alternative way to deal with whatever function they were providing. So we'll be grouting all of the existing outlet piping. And the particular things that will be new, there'll be a new building, there'll be new inlet piping, there'll be new outlet piping, there'll be new valves, and there'll be a new metering chamber, all things that will improve your operations. The valves in particular is something that we propose that hasn't been done previously. You put 2 valves in series, and the reason you put 2 valves in series is because you want to be able to prove that you can drain the reservoir. So the way you do that is you close one and you open the other, you see that it opens and you're comfortable, you close it, you open the first, and you've not let any water out. Historically, people have put 1 valve in because it's a little cheaper, and 10 years goes by and they say, if I open this, can I close it? And usually the answer is not worth the risk. And then 20 years goes by, and in some cases, I don't know when the last 9 years was open, but
I've been here 36 years and I don't remember it being open. For the
so
very reason you
by
said.
putting in a pair of valves, we can address that. So this is a plan view of the lake and the dam, and it's a kind of an engineering look. I apologize for that, but what you're seeing in the blue is the lake. This area is the existing intake structure. It has 3 inlets. These are the existing pipes to the dam. This is all going to be abandoned and filled with grout. We're going to build a new tower here. We're going to put in 3 new intakes. We're going to extend the piping. The part that you see, that these parallel lines, this is new material being put in. That's just the contours, the flattened slope. So this will spatially show you the area that will be impacted by the project, basically by flattening the slope. We're going to go through that and discharge into the existing water supply structure. The existing spillway, which is over here, is going to be replaced by a drop inlet spillway. There'll be a small additional structure built here to block it off, and it'll be discharged through a pipe and discharged to where it discharges now to the socket. That's the baseline project. On the west dike, I haven't mentioned that. If you're not intimately familiar, there's the main dam, which we're looking at. The west dike is on the other side of the reservoir. It's significantly longer. It's not as tall, but its length makes it challenging to deal with. Because we're going to increase the height of the west dike as well to take advantage of the storage, we're proposing to put in what is basically a curb. A little T-wall that will run along the top of the dike to provide a little more storage for that very extreme event. So we prepared cost estimates, and they were prepared based on an Association for Advancement of Cost Engineering. And we are at the point here where we're at about class 4. So what that means is that the project is 1 to 15% done. And what that means to me is there's 85% of it we don't know yet. So we've done our best to tell you what the cost is based on what we understand now. But as we refine the project, the costs will become more clear. And we've made assumptions that make what we think are conservative estimates. So while the cost could go up, we're hoping that the cost comes down. So these are class 4 estimates, meaning that we might be 15 to 30% low, or the price might be 20 to 50% higher than what I'm talking about today. For the baseline project, it's a $4.7 million project. That's broken up into 3 components. The main dam, which is the flattening of the slope that addresses the factors of safety. The spillway, this is the piping and the raising of the west dike with the parapet wall, and the outlet and intake works. This is the piping and the building and the valving for the water system modifications. So it's a $4.7 million project. When we prepared these estimates, it was 2015. So there may be some escalation that you might want to consider as well. We haven't done that. Like I said, we're just representing things that were already done. So we looked at two other things. What if we're going to be working on the dam and bringing in all this material, might we raise it? 5 feet was the most that we could raise it without affecting Route 212, which is on the east side. I think that's right, west side of the dam. The 2.5 elevation raise, really just halfway. There's no real reason we picked 2.5, just to see if it was a linear cost differential or if there was some point of inflection where you might get more value for the increase than you might elsewise. So raising the dam 2.5 feet would give you 29.5 more days of water supply during the worst drought you've ever experienced. So that's another month. Raising the dam 5 feet would give you 60 days. One's approximately double than the other. The reservoir is pretty uniform in height. So that's really the benefit. The benefit is more water supply to manage droughts that may be longer as we look forward to the future. Or maybe more water to have available for supporting economic development in the city or elsewhere. So this is really just a brief explanation of how we might raise the dam. This is what our cost is based on. This is the main dam. The main dam has a concrete wall in the middle that you can't see. The lime green color is the existing embankment. The brown is the existing foundation. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be placing all this material, this darker gray material, on the dam, flattening it out, essentially making it heavier and easier and more stable. Easier to maintain, more stable. We're going to take this core wall and we're going to raise it. We'll put some riprap on the new upstream slope, and this would support a higher elevation. The elevation of the water currently is 105. So this represents a 5-foot raise to elevation 1114. There's a lot of material there. That's a lot of, not information, but a lot of physical earth, dirt being brought in to do this project. So you might ask what's different about this. If I showed you quick, you'd notice, but this is the footprint of the main dam raised. The only difference is this dashed line is the extent of the footprint from the baseline. Because we're raising it 5 more feet, we're extending 15 more feet everywhere. It's a 3-on-1 slope. The piping is essentially the same, the spillway essentially the same. It's really just more material than the baseline. So we looked at how much it would cost to raise it 2.5 feet or 5. A 2.5-foot raise, we're estimating at 1.43 million. A 5-foot pool raise, 1.7 million. The only difference is the volume of material that's being brought in and a little bit of extra piping. More consequential to the raising and creating new water supply storage is the west dike. So we also looked at raising the west dike 2.5 feet or 5 feet. There's some inflow piping, the piping Bill referred to earlier that carries the water from the main hollow, goes under the existing dike. If we are to do work on the dike, we're going to be replacing that piping because same reason, it's opportunistic, we're there, we're going to replace it, we're going to make it support what we're going to be building new. The west dike, as it stands now, can support the baseline condition. There are no problems. It cannot support an increase in water surface, and it needs repairs beyond the baseline condition if it's to support a higher normal pool elevation. And with that, in addition to the additional material to raise it, there are some other things that need to happen to make it safe. So this is a cross-section of the west dike. Notice it doesn't have that concrete core wall, though it's much flatter than the main dam. So what we're going to be doing is we'll be putting some drainage in to keep the water levels down, a new tow drain, replace some of the materials. We've done explorations there. The materials are suitable for their existing use, but they're not suitable to support a higher water surface elevation. And we would then raise the dam by, this is inside the pool. We would fill on the inside of the pool to raise the dam rather than on the outside. So without increasing the footprint outward, we're increasing the footprint inward. And I'll show you what that means on the next slide. Nope, maybe the 2 slides. I don't think I missed that. A 2.5 foot pool raise is a $2.2 million project on the west dike alone. A 5 foot pool raise is a $3.5 million project, $3.3 million project. The difference, the improvements that need to be made are consistent between the two. So once those improvements are made, the incremental cost between 2 and 5 is just the extra material that needs to be brought in to raise it 2.5 feet.
Greg, so on the baseline, the earlier slide showed that concrete T-wall.
Yes,
You don't have a cost associated with,
we don't. And if you can let me go to the next slide, I think I can answer your question. If I don't answer your question on the next couple slides, remind me, because it'll be clearer. So this is the west dike. The west dike is very long. It runs along here. It's on the opposite side. It's about, well, this is 2,200 feet long, which is significantly longer than the dam. The dam's about 550 feet. So it's 4 times longer. And what we're seeing, this line here is where we would put that wall, that parapet wall. The purple is where we would fill into the reservoir to raise the dam, or raise the west dike. The area downstream is where we would have to do some work at the toe to remove some softer materials. So this is spatially much larger area. There's much more fill to be approached. It's simpler construction in that you could lower the pool and access a lot of this stuff pretty easily, almost within your normal operation. But there still is a lot of materials to be dealt with. Farther out, for those who aren't clear of the full setting, here's the west dike. This was the 2,200 feet, I think it was showed on the last. The main dam is here. Have that right?
Yeah.
There's the main dam. So you can see in terms of the magnitude, the length of the project, the area of impact, the west dike is greater, although most of the impact is on the reservoir side of the dike, not on the downstream side. So one of the things that we were concerned about when we raised the dam, when we raised the pool, more importantly, is during those extreme storm events, water surface is going to be raising yet above that and into areas that haven't currently seen water. So there are some roadways along the outside of the reservoir here, here and here, that in order to keep them dry for all events, would need to be raised. So there's an additional cost for the roadway work. And this is one of those, this is where the nuances of the projects become important. Currently, under some flood events, those roadways would flood. So, the reason they don't is because, as was mentioned, the inflow to the reservoir can be shut off. So it's useful for two reasons. When the water starts to spill over the spillway, there's really no reason to be bringing the water into the reservoir because you're just bringing it in and it's passing out. So you might as well let the water go to the Ashokan Reservoir. So it's rare that the reservoir is full. It does happen. So what we're talking about is a situation where the reservoir is full and you have a magnitude storm never before witnessed at the same time. If that happens, these roads would flood for 24 to 48 hours. So as we started to digest this since it was developed, we wonder whether that's money well spent. I don't know if it is or not. I just know it's a lot of money to raise roads that currently flood to a level that still may never flood. And I'll show you what those costs are in a minute. So to address to raise it 2.5 feet and go back, to raise it 2.5 feet, we only need to address this portion of the road. To raise it 5 feet, we need to address this portion and this portion. So it's $460,000 to raise it to support a 2.5 foot raise in pool elevation and $850,000 to support a 5 foot. A lot of details, a lot of numbers. So I'm seeing a question I'm not sure who's it from. I'm not sure if you want me to address it or you want to wait. So I'm going to just continue. Hopefully I'll get to your answer in the course of the presentation. This is really the summary of everything in terms of dollars and options. The baseline project, we talked about that, $4.7 million. It addresses the main dam, the spillway, and the outlet works. So Dennis, your question was, how come there's no money in the West Dike for the baseline? I think was your question. In the spillway option, because we're putting the parapet wall, it's really to address a spillway condition. So you'll see that this number is larger for the baseline, and that's because it's capturing the concrete wall.
Okay.
That concrete wall is essentially $270 and $80, $350,000.
250?
Yeah. That was your question, I think,
Yes.
right? So if we were to raise the dam 2.5 feet, it would be a $7.6 million project. We would be raising the main dam. We would be doing West Lake modifications. We'd be increasing, addressing the new spillway. We'd have a new tower that is incrementally more expensive than the original. We have to raise the tower by a foot. And we'd have roadway modifications. And if we were to do it with a 5 foot, all the same elements, all slightly more expensive. And this is really where we last stopped. And the question was posed, what the heck do we do? So we've done some more work. We've done a lot of head scratching. We've done a lot of grant chasing, funding chasing. And it doesn't seem like there's going to be funds coming soon, ever, hard to know. But we still have a dam safety issue that needs to be addressed. So we had a recommendation, and the recommendation is based on this premise. Do what is necessary, but prepare for the future. And what I call the future is having more water supply available if you were to need it. So what we're recommending is that we raise the dam 5 feet. Because that's the most that you could ever get out of the site, we're suggesting that you, while you're doing the work, do it once. It's economy of scale. The longer you wait, the more it will cost. And there is the possibility that a future project could undo some of the things that would already be done in terms of the new piping. And so it's a reason to do it now. address the spillway capacity the way the baseline project suggests. And that is to put that parapet wall on the west dike. By putting the parapet wall on the west dike, we know the west dike in its current situation supports the current use. It's not a problem. And finally, to build the outlet work chambers to support a 5-foot raise, which is kind of required if you're going to raise the dam 5 feet. So what this does is it addresses the factors of safety issue that we have. It addresses the spillway stability issues that we have. It improves the water supply operations and controls that you need, restoring them. But it doesn't shut out a future potential raising of the west dike if the need arises where water supply, either there's new industry or perhaps longer droughts and these things start to rear their head. So those three summed is a $5.7 million project. And the way I see it is you're spending 4.7 to address the needs and another $1 million to keep all your options open for the future. So the recommendation is to move forward with the regulatory requirements without sacrificing potential future expansion. There'll be no pool raise, meaning the water surface is going to stay right where it is. There'll be a 5-foot raise of the main dam. There'll be a parapet wall on the west dike, but no raise of the west dike. There'll be a new intake tower. In terms of the funding, the intake tower, there's a federal law. This is a long story, but I'll try to be quick. The Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund exists, funded through regulation, federal regulation. It exists so that drinking water, so communities can use drinking water funds to do drinking water needs. For some reason, there is a specific exclusion in the federal law that says it can't be used for dams. And we tested this exclusion, and it can't be used for dams.
It's also in the clean water revolving loan fund.
Correct, it's same federal regulation.
Yeah.
However, the intake tower and all the piping and the valves in the building is something that you need to do regardless of whether you are going to do any dam work. So that's really water supply work, and we believe that the entire cost of that could be funded through the state revolving loan fund. That hasn't been tested, but I really don't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case.
And I think when we made our main column improvements previously, when we had to construct a new intake up there, same exclusion applied. We couldn't, anything when on the actual dam, we had to fund out of on a market rate bond. But we were able to go through the DWSRF and fund that portion, which was the outlet works. And so I think while we haven't specifically called DOH and said, is this something you would consider, they've done it in the past. And they've done it before in other places as well.
Just have to parse the project apart.
Yes, we just have to present it in a way that, you know, it's clear that this is what the money for the DWSRF is going for. And that makes it much more affordable in terms of interest rates.
So the project, going back to the first slide, the project was kind of initiated officially in 2007, 10 years ago. And DEC has been involved in some capacity along the way and been doing annual inspections and checking in and seeing how things were going, and has been reviewed the engineering assessments, and we've met with them a few times, but they've more strongly stated that they would like to see a specific plan in terms of monies being spent and time frame of when this is going to get addressed, which was precipitous to me being here today to come to some conclusion.
The message loud and clear was they want to see that schedule sooner than later.
So
a realistic schedule.
What we're proposing is that in 2018 we would design these modifications in detail sufficient to give you a engineer's opinion of cost at bid, and sufficient to put out to bid and have a contractor construct the work. And then that work would be constructed in 2019. That's really the project. In terms of the future, or beyond that, or in parallel, really it's up in the air. What we have seen is when money becomes available, they want people to be prepared to spend it. So that's the shovel ready. You've heard that phrase probably. What that means is they want a design on the shelf and permitted so that when the money comes, you can go do it. They don't want a meeting to talk about what the scope is and 9 months to design it and another year and a half to permit it. They want to have it ready. So while we're addressing the main dam, we can also be refining what to do at the West Dike. I don't think we have a really good answer. The flooding of the roadway, for example, how tolerable is that? Is it even necessary? Could we not better demonstrate that you don't need to spend the money on the road, and that might make the cost of that more palatable? Maybe with a little bit more assessment, we could figure out whether 2.5 or 5 or maybe 3 feet is the number in terms of how much more storage might be available. So I didn't make it in 20 minutes. I'm going to say I had 20 minutes of questions, which is not true, but I'm going to still say it just to say I did it in 20 minutes.
So Greg, all your cost estimates are based, you said, on that one slide about a class 4 where we are right now.
Yes.
And I guess as we go through the process, we'll start moving down to get to a class 1.
Yes.
Will give us a better.
That's called bid documents.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess my question then is, what do we need to do to get from class 4 down to class 3 and on down to
Yeah,
class
so
1?
so we would embark on a design process.
That's all just part of design work.
One of the first things we'd be doing is doing a little bit more site explorations to better understand the foundation conditions more spatially than we know now. To date, we've done explorations on the dam that have established kind of the baseline minimum extent of information to make an assessment. But as we go into a design, we need to identify, to the extent economics allow, the full extent of what's going to be required. So the first step would be to do some further subsurface explorations to better define the soil conditions.
And that requires us to go ahead and contract with you to go to that next step.
Yeah,
First you have to accept his recommendation.
yeah,
Well, true. I mean, but
Well, the design process will give us a better handle on the final number so that we can go out for bond or fundraising.
yes, absolutely.
Fundraising?
Oh, wherever we go from
You
there.
can't shake the supermarket.
bake sale?
Roundly bake.
Anybody else have any other?
We're still talking just about Cooper Lake, so we're not looking at Reservoir 2 anymore.
Yeah, this has been the only
This is the only thing we have to do.
issue that was in front of DEC when we met with them.
It may make sense to look at the $1 million worth of work we have to do at Binny Water at the same time, just take care of the economies of scale and kind of, mobilization costs all over. It's the same, basically it's the same work at both places.
It's very similar.
Only it's much,
embankment.
much less extensive, right?
Yeah.
But that's another discussion.
On the slide, it showed what looks like the residential neighborhoods adjacent to the road. Where,
Like on Cooper Lake Road?
It's here.
yeah,
Nope. Sorry. That was too fast for my own good.
There are some down there.
So,
you're right, those are,
it's that there's a few properties here. Actually, all this hatched area are adjacent property owners. This is one property, and these are 2 others. So there's 3 properties here and a 4th over there. So there are,
And the other land is state land, or who owns?
We own a lot
It's
of
up, it's ours?
Yeah, right, this area, you're talking about all over.
Yeah, in
here,
between
yes,
the
that's
two houses.
your land, correct. So, and there's not to envision any impacts to these property owners, except to the extent that their roadway would either flood under a very extreme event, or be raised so that it doesn't flood under a very, and then there'd be some construction impacts.
If you raise the roadway and it doesn't flood, would it provide some extra protection to the property owners on the other side of the roadway?
Sure. I guess you could argue that if there were waves, there'd be erosion on their front lawn that you would be essentially protecting them from, because the side of the road would take the damage, take the beating.
Basically.
Yeah.
But at this point, we're just really focusing on what we have to do.
No, I understand.
Right,
I
no,
was
but-
just
yeah.
curious.
Unless the board wants to go for the full.
The key is the money. I mean, we
Exactly.
talked about, that's why we haven't done much in the last 2 years, is we're looking for funding. It's raise property rates by, or water rates by 20%, not a problem.
You joking?
Yes. Here's some water.
When do you think we have to act in relation to the state?
On the meeting that we had, Dennis and I and Greg were there, I would say that they're looking for a schedule by the end of the year. Would you agree? Both of you?
Yeah. And that's just the schedule.
It's just, and then they're gonna review it and get back to us and say, I mean, I
I
don't
mean,
think.
there was a tentative one put together when Greg put together.
No,
Okay.
no,
We might have had a schedule presented in the engineering
Yeah.
assessment, but it doesn't really hold,
Right.
doesn't really hold
I mean,
up,
there's-
because there's been so much more work.
I mean, there's concepts that they're gonna wanna know in the schedule in regards to stuff. I mean, I don't know how detailed their schedule needs to be.
that's why we hired Greg.
Yeah, my experience is that they want to see a commitment towards progress. And I've developed schedules for them where we have specific milestones that says, we expect that you're gonna have 6 weeks to review and you better be ready. And I've given them schedules that had 3 dates on a line. That's start in January, finish in December, review meeting in June. It really just depends on who the regulator is in this case. Yours is retiring, and so I don't really know what you might expect. Where you're gonna get someone who's gonna be more of a stickler or less, it's hard to know. And the other piece is the schedule, the realistic schedule is dependent upon what needs to be designed and what needs to be constructed. If you were to say, and I'm not recommending and I'm not expecting, that you would say, let's raise the thing 5 feet and we're gonna do the whole thing, including the roads, there would be a much longer construction period, there'd be a much longer design period.
A much longer
you know,
permit
And a
period.
much longer permitting period, and we likely wouldn't be constructing in 2019. So that's really the reason why I parsed the project the way I did, because there's a real dam safety need, public safety need to do the work to get it up to the standards that the state requires.
Okay. Is there a way to meet the state requirements completely without raising the dam to increase storage, and yet incorporate in your development to meet the standards such that the improvements that you make would be sufficient? If at a later time they wanted to raise the dam, that could be done.
Okay, so I'm not gonna say no, because there might be a way, not in what's been envisioned. And the reason is because we're gonna be laying piping through the dam. And what you don't wanna do is come back later and add material on top of the piping that's there, and do earthwork on top of that. Because it could settle, it could crack, and then you're into bigger problems. That being said, hypothetically, you could just build a concrete wall around the whole thing, right? That's no earth. And that's how you could raise the dam later.
But it's not gonna take care of this, the tower, the
No.
intake tower.
No, you
Or
still
it's not
need to
gonna take
build
care
that.
of the spillway,
It's
which
not
is
gonna-
still a separate.
Correct, correct. But I think what he's suggesting is, could you do something later that you could spend all the money later and achieve your objective without wasting the money you're spending now? And maybe wasting is not the right answer, but I think I don't think there's an option out there with a price point that's gonna make the little bit of savings you have now worth how much it would cost later. If that makes some sense.
What's the risk of more delay with the safety of the dam?
I can't really answer that question. The dam is stable, but there are a lot of pipes that go through this dam. There is evidence of previous movement of the dam. You know, if we were to have a seismic event, I can't predict that, nor can I predict the storm event. It's,
I mean, if the DEC, when they did their inspections, thought, or when Greg did his engineering assessment, thought that the dam was in any danger, they'd be there, we would have done this work already. But he can't predict what's gonna happen tomorrow. Nor you can with any dam, but the bottom line is it doesn't meet the regulatory requirements. And so,
Are there financial penalties?
let's just say we didn't go down that road when we, in our discussions.
Yes.
Eventually,
There
yes.
could be, if we decide we're not doing anything, there'll be an order on consent and there'd be daily fines. And, you know, the comment of the section chief for the Dam Safety Division was that's not in anybody's best interest, so let's kind of get this to them and keep talking and keep moving forward as a team kind of effort.
I think the other relevant, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Are there undue liability risks for keeping delaying it?
Financially, of course,
I mean, legal liability.
legally as well, but not personally. I mean, you can't ignore it, obviously. But I'm just concerned, I was just wondering why some of this work is done, assuming that you wanted to go with just meeting the standards. I don't mean just, but you're able to, without incorporating that, for example, on your intake. I'm speaking as a layman now, but I mean, if you're putting a pipe in, instead of putting a 4-inch pipe, you put in a 6-inch pipe now, so that when you're ready to raise it, you'd have sufficient piping, things like that. There aren't minor things you can do with it.
I don't think so. I don't think, there's always ways to design something differently and to come up with a new idea. I feel like we've vetted them significantly over the course of time. And this is where we are. I think it's the best. The incremental cost between the baseline and what we're recommending, I think is the most beneficial if you have a hope of having the opportunity to have more storage here sometime in the future.
Would if the board, as I understand, you have 3 options here, either leave it as it is, 2.5 or 5 feet. If the board went with just, and I don't mean the word just, but if they did the project to meet the state standards and the federal standards, and later they decided years hence to raise it, would they have to scrap what they've done now and do it all over again?
No, sorry, but I think,
Please.
Bill, what he presented today was actually a 4th option. You want to go back to that slide with the red circles? I think what he was saying is that the red circles is actually the 4th option, and what he's recommending to us is to not just do the baseline, but also to not raise the pool, but to still make the modifications of the dam if at some
Okay.
point we wanted. So we would make the modifications to the dam if at some point later on we wanted to raise the pool, we would not only have the dam prepared, but we would have the new intake tower prepared.
Correct.
The only thing that we're not doing as part is to actually do the west deck. And
And
so
the roadway.
we're basically avoiding the the west dike work. And if at some point later on, we wanted to do the 5-foot pool raise, we would spend the 3.3 million plus the 850,000 on the roads to be able to go to the next step.
Well,
That's
perfect.
how I
That
see it.
makes sense, that answers my question, thank you.
So you had stepped out. I think I saw you leave, but now I'm understanding better why the question was, what the question was. And I should have answered it better the first time, so thank you for doing that. You nailed it. I want to clarify though. What we evaluated was 2.5 and 5 feet, and the most we could get is 5, which is why we're saying 5. I don't think those are the only options. I think once we embark on this, I think a little bit closer look at the West Dike and the roadway flooding, there won't be 2 options. There'll be the right answer. It might be 3 feet, it might be 3.7 feet. I don't know what it is. It'll be a recommendation that says if you're going to raise, you should raise it 2.5 feet, and these are the reasons why, and we'll elaborate on what those are when we've discovered them.
Any other questions?
Yes, I know this is a board meeting, but we have both Ulster supervisor who pays a lot of our bills, and we also have Bill McKenna, the Woodstock supervisor. I know we don't want to general, open it for questions for everybody, but we want to let them ask any questions.
Sure. They have any questions?
What is your estimated period of construction, and are there any potential service disruptions?
So I can answer so a year, pretty much 2019 is where the work will be done. The way that we are planning to do it, there wouldn't be any service disruptions. There would, the reservoir would be maintained in service. There would be careful control of water quality as there needs to be. There's really no other source. So
There is another source, but not for all of it.
No.
1 million gallons a day for the town. We can get off your system.
I guess I was speaking from Kingston's point of view.
Well, and I think the biggest challenge during construction is turbidity
Correct.
loading for our filters. And so that's the reason we did the plant work first. So we're hoping that with cofferdams and other, construction techniques, that we won't have that. But if we did, we certainly would chat with you about, you coming off for that period of time during the construction and helping us in that sense.
And I don't know where your service connection is, but we could do some brief shutdowns at Cooper Lake and survive out of mini water storage for a day or two, depending on how.
And that's when the town augments us quite nicely. When we had that transmission main failure, the town was able to give us over 4 days about 3.5 million gallons. And when we brought the reservoir back online, we had less than 3.5 million gallons in the reservoir. So, they're able to give us combined about 1 million gallons a day of our 4 million. So, it would stretch any water
Right.
to make that work.
And I think that, so that's kind of one of those examples of a detail that affects the cost of the project. If the contractor has to come in and not tolerate a single outage, he's got to figure out how to do it, and it's going to cost you money. If the town, or if the water department can offer creative solutions to borrow water, for example, for periods of time to extend the time that they're working in the reservoir, then they can be done more cost effectively. So it's just an example. We don't know until we're there, but those are the types of details that get resolved along the way. We can only speculate now. So I know, I knew you had a question.
That's Bill McKenna, supervisor of town of
Bill.
Woodstock.
So, first off, I just say to the board, at the town of Woodstock, we do have a vested interest in Cooper Lake that, should that thing ever happen, that there is some understanding about tying in. So we're not in opposition to any of this. This makes a lot of sense with global warming, global changing, more intense, less frequent rainfalls, the more water you can capture. So, we're not down here to protest this.
Good to hear.
The one question I did have earlier, when I saw about raising that road 5 to 6 feet, and I could be wrong, I haven't shot it with the transit, but it seems to me that at least one or maybe two of those houses would then be below the road grade. So that would be something, that we just want to take a good hard look at. And I'm sure you will. And also, I'm sitting in front of another property owner who, if the water went up, she owns a lot of lakefront property there, so I'm guessing she's going to lose a little property as well. So I'm sure she'll have some concerns. And lastly, the business community would shoot me if I didn't mention that 2019 is the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock Festival. And they are very optimistic that we're going to have a booming year. So, I hope that we could just work construction, and there'll be a lot of stuff coming through. So, just early concerns.
So I guess I can, if you don't mind, I can capture some of those. I want to be clear on the impact of raising the pool. The water department doesn't typically operate with a water surface that's any higher than the existing weir. And I said it before, but I'll say it again. Water comes from the Mink Hollow, it goes through a pipe, goes into the reservoir. When the reservoir starts to spill, meaning when water is up to the level of the weir and it starts to spill over, they close the gate so that that water continues to discharge. That's how they operate. So for many months of the year, and some years, for many years in a row, they don't even get to the spill level because there's just not enough water.
Understood.
And they've experienced a couple significant droughts where they've gone 10, 20 feet below the pool level. I have the specifics of those things from previous presentations. So the impacts of the road flooding, or even the property flooding, that's one of the things that we need to evaluate in terms of what's the right elevation. And I don't know the right answer, but the idea would be we're going to raise it to a point where it affects nobody's property. But under the rare event where you have an extreme storm, on top of a time frame where the reservoir happens to be full, would you likely to be flooded? Yes, you probably will be flooded for a short period of time. I can tell you that in the period of record that the dam's been there, you would have never been flooded. Because the water system is managed that way, and that storm hasn't arrived. And all the storms that have arrived didn't arrive when the reservoir was full. So those circumstances haven't, could they?
Well, I was only concerned that if you raise the road up, it seems to me that if you raise the road up 6 feet, and I could be wrong, you spend more time up there, Judy, but one of the houses might actually be below the road level, is what I was suggesting.
The reason we picked 5 feet was because you can't go any higher than that.
Got it.
Because then you gotta move 212, and
Right,
that seemed
right.
out of our
Right.
reach. And totally impractical.
Couldn't fault you for trying though.
Hey, it'd be all right. And the 2.5 was just, well, let's get a number and see what it is. But the real number is, maybe it'll come, it'll be there, because, and I think of trying to go to work when there's a flood in Sauk Hill Road, and when you're trying to get to the treatment plant, that road, and that's the kind of closing we're talking about. We're talking about a couple of days where there's water over the road, where but we still don't want to close that.
Does that road, has it ever flooded from just rainfall that's not affected by our reservoir?
No. And my impression is that road right by those houses is, the water level's a good 10
feet down.
10 feet, 15 feet down. So I'm just wondering why you have to raise the road there at all.
There's a couple of dips in there that we
Okay.
would have to deal with. I mean, based on the surveys that we have,
Yeah.
and we do a little more.
This is a minor, more.
Yeah. The
Yeah, it's stuff-
beavers up there.
The way we're looking at it, it's gonna be something that's gonna be years down the road
Right.
anyway. And we're
If-
struggling here, we're just
Right.
dealing with the
The only time
spillway.
I've ever seen Cooper Lake flooded at all was due to the beavers behind the west side,
Okay.
and that's caused the
Yeah,
flooding.
I do know there was
And,
swampy
you know,
water over in that area.
Poor Mike.
Mike's been pretty good about that
I mean,
lately.
awesome, but I mean,